Hello and welcome to 4th and 1 with Faith and Kayla. It's your co-host Kayla.
And your other co-host Faith.
And
I've been dreading this.
We're really depressed, honestly.
I've been dreading this talk, to say the least. And, I'm not going to lie. Last week we did have a lot to say. And this week we have a lot to say, too. But it's just not as positive.
Yeah.
But it's okay.
Yeah. We determined we were going to have a podcast. We were determined we were going to talk about tech football. That includes the good, the bad, the ugly.
So here we are.
Unfortunately, this week was just a little bit ugly.
Right.
But it's okay.
That's okay.
It's a growing experience.
It is a growing experience for everyone involved. Okay, let's just jump right into that post-game ice bath. We lost to the University of Texas Longhorns this past weekend, 70-35. I really don't like repeating that score.
If that's the only time you hear it, there's a reason for that.
Right. So let's just start out the obvious of 70 points.
Yeah. The defense allowed 70 points. Literally.
And for the first half of the game, all 5 drives that the offense for Texas had, they scored on. They scored a touchdown. And that's not okay on any team, anywhere, any division. Even if you're in junior high playing football, whenever the offense can score a touchdown on your defense every single drive,
time.
That is not a good statistic to want to look at afterwards.
And you and I are two people who highly, highly praise our defense. Mm-hmm. So I think it came as a big shock and a very painful experience for the two of us. Jalen Hutchings in the post-game press conference owned up to the defense being able to stop the run, which I thought was very bold of him. It showed a lot of courage, a lot of strength. And he recognized that there were some really big gaps that were not filled.
Yeah, and I think that, to say the least, there was obviously a lot of missed tackles and a lot of open guys. And these sound very basic concepts, but that's the problem, is that these are fundamentally major issues that we need to fix to have a successful season.
Last podcast, we predicted that if Bijan Robinson ran all over our defense, we would lose the game. And
we actually did talk about that.
We might have spoken into fruition, Faith.
That was just really something that I wish, we could have seen coming, but I guess it's okay. We're
going to rally.
Yes.
Season's going to go on.
We'll be just fine. Let's talk about the elephant in the room here.
The season is still going to go on, but it's not going to go on the same way.
Yes. So Tyler Suck, as most Tech fans know by now, broke his collarbone. Yep. Big sigh for that. Big sigh.
We're literally just... It's a heavy week to be a Texas Tech fan.
It really is.
A very heavy week. He was sacked, broke it in the second quarter. He did have a rushing touchdown earlier in the game for 6 yards, which was awesome. But this is the third time in 4 years our QB1 has been hurt.
That is just painful to hear. 3 times.
Painful.
Like, if you have the best quarterback in the league, if you have the worst quarterback in the league, having to restructure an offense around a brand new quarterback is something that no offensive coordinator wants to do.
Especially consistently for multiple years in a row.
Right. Which I am thankful, though, that we have Sonny Cumbie this year, just because, he didn't have to deal with this necessarily last year or the years before. So it's like, okay, this is just, a little hiccup for him. For all of our other Tech people, they're like, okay, this is happening. Here we go again. But you know what? I am very impressed with Henry Columbie's, drive to step up to the plate and jump into such a large game, like very unexpectedly, and have to take over. So,
and we're really going to sing his praises here in a few minutes, but let's discuss very briefly one thing you also mentioned last week.
Yes, our special teams. Oh my gosh, we literally talked about this last week about how there's 3 sides of the ball. There's offense, defense, and special teams, and yet again, our special teams
struggled.
They struggled, and it was not fun to watch as a fan. It wasn't. It's frustrating because it's like, okay, is this not an obvious area that we need to work on? And maybe it's 2 weeks in a row now that we have seen it, and our coaches will also see it and hopefully be like, hey, we're going to stay late today.
We're going to do something different.
Switch out some guys in there, whatever it takes to get that to happen. And what we're talking about here is that punt return that got returned all the way for a touchdown. I will give a little bit of praise to the Longhorns on that. It was an awesome punt return for them.
It was.
But it was also a very failed area on our part for special teams.
We got very lucky.
We really
got called back.
We did.
Very, very lucky that it got called back.
Yes.
Which is kind of surprising for me personally, because having watched Austin McNamara consistently last year, he is not a punter that normally makes mistakes, which I will say this wasn't his fault.
Right.
And that's one of those places where you do have a star within your special teams, but it takes the entire team to work. It can't just be one guy carrying the weight of everybody. So there's your little post-game ice bath. Let's jump into some positives, Faith. I would love to break into the huddles and talk about the players and plays that did make us... We did put up 35 points against UT.
Right. We put up 35 points, and I would like to start this conversation by saying Henry Colombi. Let's talk about Henry Colombi. Our second-string quarterback stepped up in the second quarter when Tyler Shuck went down and got hurt, and he completed 17 for 23 passes and had 324 yards, which is quite a bit for somebody who only played 2.5 quarters.
And that's 21 yards more than Texas's quarterback.
Which is... Oh, that's frustrating to hear because it's like the score should have been a lot better considering that was more yardage from our quarterback than theirs. And the fact that they put up 70 points. 70 points is so much. It's okay. It's fine.
He did have 3 touchdowns, but 1 interception. But 3 touchdowns.
Right.
So highlighting the highs.
Right.
And he played a really solid game. He had a couple huge passes and all around was a really consistent quarterback for us.
Yeah, it was exciting to see and kind of surprising, I guess, in a way, even though it seemed like a lot of things repetitively in that game went wrong. Henry Colombi didn't necessarily fail us in any...
He was something that kind of went right.
Right, exactly. So it was, and like I said, it's frustrating to see the score at the end of the game, but to look back and to really break down each player, each play to see who did well, who didn't, what we need to fix, what we need, what needs more work. Henry Colombi did a pretty good job. So let's talk about Henry Colombi. He did a decent job against Texas, having to jump in there, and he was a second-string quarterback last year. Let's talk about him. Who is Henry Colombi?
So Henry Colombi came from Utah State, which is where Coach Wells was previously, and transferred to Tech and played a lot last year behind Alan Bowman. And when Alan Bowman got hurt, similar to this year, he stepped up to the plate and was Texas starting quarterback.
This is starting to sound all too familiar right now.
And it is starting to sound all too familiar because we're repeating history. Ironically, Henry Colombi's first game last year was against West Virginia, which is our opponent this week.
Right. And that's a little bit... It's ironic, but in a way, I hope that we recognize these things and we're like, okay, we're going to have a better season than we did last year based on, like, what's reoccurring for Texas Tech football.
So clearly we have some consistent patterns and some consistent issues that are causing this underdog quarterback, honestly, to be able to be brought into the limelight and show what he's made of.
Right.
And I think he really carries that mentality of a snapback quarterback. He's forgets things quickly, which sounds kind of odd, but in football, they always say you want to be able to forget things quickly and move on. You just want to forget the last play and jump to the next one. You want to forget the last mistake and jump to fixing that mistake going forward.
Right.
And Colombi said that Coach Cumbie, that's kind of a mouthful. We're going to have to get used to that one. Colombi said that Coach Cumbie told him during the game, you can only take it one play at a time and one drive at a time.
Right.
When Colombi came in, we were in enough of a deficit that it was going to be difficult for him to bring the game back. But he did a really good job, and he had some huge plays. So let's break into some of those big plays that Colombi had that really kind of shone within the midst of a chaos and a ugly game, and they were a little ray of sunshine for Tech football.
They really
Tell me
were.
all about him, Faith.
So it was good to see that he had 3 major passes that all led to touchdowns. One to wide receiver Miles Price for 40 yards. One to Loic Fungi for 69 yards. That's so much, 69 yards. And then he had another one to Kylan Geiger for 75 yards for a touchdown. All 3 of those were to wide receivers that we haven't gotten to see a ton this season yet, but they were all resulted in a touchdown. So on our end, it was a win, like it was not a win, but it was it was several good plays.
Something that's really evident to Tech fans and to us watching him make those 3 huge plays is Henry Colombi has an arm.
Right.
And that was something that was really understated last year, consistently playing under Yost, who, no disrespect intended, threw a ton of screens, which does not really give a quarterback the opportunity to shine.
Right.
That it was these huge plays that Texas Tech rarely has breakout passes like that. And I think it was a huge benefit to Tech fans and a little bit of a bump to be like, okay, we're getting destroyed.
Yes.
It's painful. We're losing terribly. But hey, look at this. We had 3 huge plays, which
We did,
awesome.
And all three of those wide receivers, they've been in the games this season so far, but they haven't made those huge plays quite yet. So it's good to see three wide receivers that we haven't seen make huge plays like that quite yet, and to see our backup quarterback be on the other end of that, So it was there's a little bit of hope there, honestly. There's a little bit of hope, and
every storm cloud has a silver lining.
That's fine.
Our silver lining comes in the form of Henry Colombi.
Right? And you know what? If this was our one, really bad game, then I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with it.
I still don't want to think about the fact that it was to Texas, but
no,
I'm okay with it if Tech lost this one game really toughly.
We mentioned storm clouds. Let's
talk about that little fast cloud that we had been talking about
fast cloud
multiple times last week. We're talking about
Bajan. He had 18 carries for 137 yards.
It's really tough. It's like I heard somebody on a podcast last week say, Tech's defense should look out for Bajan. Weird.
I wonder who that could have been.
Interesting.
Oh, wait. We predicted that.
Literally. So
we predicted that. I'm sure Tech predicted that. But sometimes you just have those players that have a little something special.
Yes, and there was one of those for sure for Texas that maybe Kayla and I didn't see coming, but maybe Tech's defense saw coming and didn't realize it. I don't know, but we had three guys on him, and his name is Xavier Worthy, wide receiver, number 8 for Texas.
And he
had quite the play.
He had a field day.
He
with
really
the Tech
did.
Defense.
And you know what? I'm sad to think about it, but he's probably going to use some of those plays in his draft highlights one day, and you got to give it to him. He's an athlete.
He played a beautiful game.
Yes, he did.
It hurts to say,
right?
But he did so well. He had 5 receptions for 100 yards and 3 touchdowns.
That is so many. You would think after one touchdown we would be like, oh wow, this kid's pretty good. After 2, it's like, oh crap, we should have covered him. And on the 3rd touchdown, you would be like, okay, so maybe put in the next, whoever.
We've always had issues with our cornerbacks. Consistently, that's an area of the defense we struggle with.
Right.
And this game just really showed that.
I go back to that one play in the second quarter. It was 3rd and 5 from the 26-yard line, and Xavier Worthy, wide receiver for the Longhorns, had 3 of our Texas Tech guys on him, wide on rice, and he caught the ball anyways for a touchdown. And it was so frustrating to watch because it's like, you know what? Maybe he was just a little bit more athletic. We had 3 guys covering him.
That can explain why he made this play. It just hurts us to have to admit that we had some faults.
Right. And I think it would be kind of interesting to see him throughout the next few years. Maybe he will go to the NFL. Maybe he'll do awesome. And then that's where you just gotta give it to him. Give him some kudos for that one because homeboy is really good and his statistics show it too.
They very much show it.
Right.
But I would love to highlight, we've highlighted Texas, which God forbid we never have to do again. Nevertheless, let's highlight some of our Tech guys. Let's toss some kudos to the guys who did well considering the circumstances.
So we had our running back, Roderick Thompson, had 16 carries for 54 yards.
Which is amazing.
Right. He had a pretty good game. It was good to see that he still had some good statistics, even though it looked like, once again, our score 70-35 did not look so great. We still had a few guys really do awesome within this game, and Roderick Thompson was for sure one of them.
I also think Kalen Geiger, who we mentioned very briefly earlier, had that huge touchdown. He had 5 receptions for 100 yards and a touchdown, which actually is the same as Xavier Worthy had, but with 2 less touchdowns. So that if you compare the 2 of them, there is obviously some breakdowns in the defense that allowed Xavier Worthy to have those touchdowns, but we have a wide receiver who's on par, who's equal with that skill we're praising. And that's
it almost kind of makes me think our offense was responding with some touchdowns here and there, and our defense wasn't able to stop Texas, clearly 70 points. And that just kind of goes to show that it looked like Texas may have just had some better athletes. And our quarterback got hurt, and our defense kind of got broke down. It was just kind of very fundamental things, and then it was just obvious that they just have a couple of athletes that really just ran all over us. And
if you compare,
took our sack lunch.
We hate to say it, but we all knew, like you said, the Texas Longhorns are the bully of the Big 12.
Right.
They suck. They're really good at sports, and it makes us angry.
Right.
Because they're so good.
In the capital of our state. They have
all this money, and they can do whatever they want, whatever.
Right. They're like private school kids without being private school.
But Kalen Geiger was on the same point. He's at the same level.
Right.
He just had a couple less touchdowns, so it's okay.
Yeah.
It's going to be okay.
Just 12 less points, you know.
And we mentioned our defense not doing so well, but Colin Schooler had a really good game.
He did have a good game. You got to give it up to him. You know, just because the score didn't reflect that good game, he still had a good game.
It's right. Okay. He had 9 tackles, 3 of them solo.
That was a lot, but, you know, sadly, it's just like he probably needed like 10 more for us to shut down their offense.
I also think that some of the breakdowns of the defense can be attributed to lack of communication within the entirety of the defense, because we had our standouts, we had our stars, we had our typical people we say, hey, these are really good people to watch, mostly the linebackers and some of the D linemen, but those corners and safeties and those secondary players, there was just a breakdown you can't stop. And we did have some obvious issues. I mean, like we said, Jalen Hutchinson owned up to it. Our D line did not play the best game they could have. They did not play the best they normally do, but they did pretty well.
And I really truly believe their quarterback read our defense like a book. And it just goes to show once again, maybe that wasn't even necessarily athleticism in their quarterback and in their offense and whatnot, but it was just a lot of preparation. Not that our guys didn't prepare, but it was a lot of them being smart on the field, on the line of scrimmage. There was something that Matt Wells continued to say in the press conference after the game, and that was just, they own the line of scrimmage. And he just kept saying they own the line of scrimmage. And he's so right, and I'm sure he told our team that too after the game, that they just own the line of scrimmage. And sadly, that's just dead on accurate.
It's just the truth.
It's just the truth.
It's just what happened.
There is one guy, though, that we really would like to discuss who got quite a bit of playing time for somebody we didn't see coming.
I would agree. We had 3 quarterbacks play in this game. And Faith, you mentioned we were planning that you've written a lot of stories about this guy because he's from the Panhandle area.
Right.
Break me into Donovan Smith.
Donovan Smith is our 3rd-string quarterback who
is now 2nd string.
Yeah, is now 2nd string. Came in behind Henry Colombi and got to come in and score a touchdown. So he is from Friendship High School, and his dad is actually one of the coaches.
But that 1-yard run for a touchdown was at the end of a huge drive. He had 15-play drive for 75 yards for a total of 6 minutes.
Right. So this kid came in here kind of like hot and ready to make some plays. Like,
and we didn't have the ball a ton in the game, but he had the ball for 6 minutes, almost 7 minutes in the 4th quarter.
Right. And that, I feel like that just kind of shows a little bit of his own composure as an athlete and as a quarterback. And maybe that comes from being a long line of coming from a family of athletes, it sounds like, and, you know, being a coach's kid. Maybe he just knows and has that composure and confidence about him that who cares if I'm the 3rd string? Who cares if our starting quarterback just got hurt? I'm going to go in there and I'm going to make a play. And he did that. So even though it was in the 4th quarter and it was just a little bit too late at that point in the game, it was cool to see that who's going to be our 2nd string quarterback. And it was also just going back and thinking about, you know, if you're in the coach's standpoint and your start quarterback is out and we're already down by 30 something points, you might as well give the kid who's about to be 2nd string some playing time, because you can never know, like, you can't predict these things. When Tyler Shuck went down and got hurt and sacked, you never know. Whenever, should we have given Henry Colombi more playing time? Should we give Donovan Smith more playing time now in preparation for the next guy? And I think that was just like cool to see that they were like, oh, let's recognize we're down and let's move forward, put the next kid in, give him some playing time, and God forbid anybody else get hurt.
You mentioned composure, and we don't normally discuss high school stats, but because Donovan Smith is so young,
we should.
And these are so impressive, let's throw some stats at y'all.
Yes, hit me with it.
In his 1 season at Friendship High School in Lubbock, Texas, 1 season, he had 3,123 yards, 25 touchdowns, and rushed for 489 yards. And
ridiculous.
Those rushing yards included 13 more touchdowns.
This kid just like dominated Friendship High School, and I grew up in the Panhandle, and I remember hearing about him, and everyone was just like, this Friendship quarterback and this guy, and I was like, who is this kid and where did he come from? And I guess I don't even know. Like, I guess we're glad now that because he's playing for Tech and he's probably going to get some more playing time. He's going to see the field quite a bit this season, I bet.
And I think we can attribute a lot of his rushing yards to the fact he is the son of our running back coach, DeAndre Smith.
I'm thinking this kid's pretty fast. Like, I want to know his 40 time, honestly.
I would love to know his 40 time. We should ask him.
we should.
But that's one of those things where it's nice to have a backup quarterback that has a long history of producing so well on the field. And even though it was in high school and not at a Division I level, that still puts a lot of trust. And we also not only have Donovan Smith behind Henry Columbia, but we also have our true freshman quarterback, Baron Morton, who, this is a really hot take, and I know we're mentioning Donovan Smith and comparing the two of them. I kind of think Baron Morton's the future of Texas Tech football.
Okay.
I don't have a reason. I don't have the stats laid out. It's just a gut feeling.
You know what?
If I'm wrong, hang me by my toes. But if I'm right, I expect a round of applause. So
that's okay. I would love for, us to put a little bit of fire under everybody that could be the future and the leaders of Tech football. It's exciting to watch and see. And maybe we'll have that. You never know when we're going to have our next Patrick Mahomes.
Amen. Amen. We mentioned some young guys. Let's hop back briefly to some old guys. Old guys. I mean, they are.
They're seniors. We expect them to have good games and good statistics after every game.
We just want to throw out Rico Jeffers, per usual, had a good game. He had 7 total tackles, 2 of them solo. Adrian Fry had a good game. He had 6 total tackles, 4 of them solo. And Tyree Wilson also had a really good game. We've never mentioned him before because he's a very understated but extremely influential player on our Tech defense. He plays defensive line, and in this game alone, he had 3 solo tackles and 4 tackles total.
Right, which was pretty big considering, we were playing the Longhorns, and we needed, every solo tackle we could get, every collective. We just needed all the tackles in the world. And so it's kind of like, we mentioned these guys, they still had their tackles, still had their solo tackles, but somehow they still put 70 points up on the board. But, we got to give it to Tyree Wilson for sure, because he had 3 solo tackles, and he transferred here from A&M, and it was just he had 20 offers actually coming out of high school.
An absolute lot.
Right. So let's talk about this kid. First of all, he is 6'6", very large guy. He's
built like a tree.
No, literally.
His legs are the width of you and me, Faith. He's massive.
Right, which is what you want to hear in football for a D lineman.
Amen.
And so I think that, in his future, maybe he could be seeing some looks from the NFL for sure. And that would be exciting for Tech football.
And last season alone, he had 7 total tackles, 3 assisted tackles, and 1.5 sacks for a total of 10 tackles on the season. Which, if you look at the Longhorns game, he had 3 just in that one alone.
He got a third of those tackles already.
Which is huge, and we have so much hope and trust in this guy. Faith, I would love to get your thoughts and your opinion on something we normally don't discuss.
Oh, no, don't say it.
There's really one big thing a 70-35 loss can be chalked up to.
It's the elephant in the room.
It's the elephant for the past 3 seasons.
And his name is Matt Wells.
And I respect him as a man, and I think he's a great individual, and he's incredible at building high schoolers into college athletes and building them into men. He's a really nice guy. But I was kind of frustrated by something. In the post-game press conference, Wells seemed to continually be blaming anybody but himself. At one point, he was even blaming the players. He insulted Shuck's arm, which he's hurt.
That was frustrating to watch for sure, because I feel like it was, and this could have been, I don't know what it's like to be a head coach of a D1 football team.
Exactly.
And to what it's like to go into a press conference after losing to one of the biggest teams in the Big 12 by 35 points, and then be shot questions left and right and have to respond with, oh, well, my quarterback is hurt and I did not do well. Because I do believe that the 70-35 is a reflection not only to our players, to our star quarterback getting hurt, but also to our head coach.
I would agree. And it sucks, but so many people in Lubbock are calling for his heads right now. And we're not doing that.
Right.
We are not speaking in terms of this should happen and this should happen and na.
Right.
But we are saying, hey,
we are frustrated.
There's some issues, and they're big issues. And when you lose to your rival team by that big of a deficit, it really just puts a red star.
Yeah, and you know what? It's got people knocking on the athletic director's office, I guarantee it. And so I think that just going forward, I don't know. I think about the beginning of the season, it was something that was very heavily talked about amongst all Raider fans everywhere, whether it was young, old, I mean, amongst the players, I feel like even there was just a lot of talk, especially when Sonny Cumbie was hired last year. So there's always been this talk in the last, I don't know, 6 months or so about Sonny Cumbie and how he may or may not be the next head coach. We don't know that. We keep hearing that. We have no idea. All we know is that Matt Wells has continued to, we had a losing season last year, and so it wasn't pretty to watch that.
I think it's hard to sit and look at someone you respect and someone whose job and role you will never understand.
Right.
And say, hey, you're not really doing it well. It's plain to see that, like, Tech isn't producing in the way we should be. And although we're getting these really big transfers and all these different people coming in and we're having these big plays and these big moments, we keep ending up with some losing records. And we keep falling short when it really matters. And that's not really a team issue.
Yes, and that's like kind of something that we talked about a little bit earlier in this podcast is, we have a couple of guys that had really good stats this game. They did not have these like god-awful stats where they pretty much just didn't show up. They just, performed at the same rate that they have been the last 3 games, but yet the score was 70-35. So that was frustrating to see because it's like, okay, well, if our guys did their jobs, who wasn't doing their job?
At some point, it's out of their hands.
Right. And it is out of their hands. And I go back to think about Cliff Kingsbury being the head coach for Tech football. He went on to be an NFL coach, and it seems like he succeeded from this place.
He failed forward.
Right.
He didn't do as well as he could have at Tech.
Yes.
But, I mean, he ended up in the NFL, so good for him.
Right. Good for him. But I go back even further than that, long time ago, to Mike Leach days where Tech football was everything and more. And I think that was a direct reflection of Mike Leach being our head coach.
Unfortunately, he cursed us, and it's showing.
He did. He did. After he left here, I feel like I was just like, I miss Mike Leach days, especially whenever, even though the games were tough and long, we had a winning record at the end of each season.
Exactly. But we would love to see some more. We'd love to see some wins. We'd love to see some production. At the moment, we're hesitant. We're hesitant. Not determined, but we're hesitant.
Yes. I have a lot of faith in our players. A lot of I'm just looking for us to show out and have individual athletes kind of grow and develop over time, regardless of, Matt Wells, Sonny Cumbie, all of the rest of our coaching staff. We look at Coach Smith for the running backs. I don't even want to hear anything more about the coaches. I just want to see wins and start seeing a winning season.
Exactly. So let's jump into the X's and O's of next week's game, where we can see some of those players shine.
Right. So our defense, obviously, like we've talked about, kind of fell for a lot of fakes in Texas's offense. So that is one thing looking forward to this week. I feel like we're going to have to be smarter on the field. It's one thing to have the athleticism, to be quick, be fast, to be big. It's one thing, we talked about how big Tyree Wilson is, but we're going to need a very smart defense going forward.
I think losing to Texas always kind of puts a chip on the shoulder of Tech athletes, and I'm sure those gaps in those plays we miss are going to be filled because I don't know this for a fact, but I can almost guarantee you they're watching so much more film than they did last week, even though I'm sure they watched a ton, where it's, hey, we know we messed up.
Right.
Let's fix it.
Right. And I think that chip on our shoulder is just, I would like to take that chip on our shoulder to the end of a winning season, honestly.
Oh. Amen.
It would be great to see at the end of the season that, this is our turning point. This is where we turn around and we start fixing mistakes as soon as they happen and correct them within the game, not after the game.
It would be.
So we talked about this a little bit earlier, but Henry Colombi, whenever he stepped up to the plate last year, it was against West Virginia, and he's going to do it again this year because this will be his first game starting as our starting quarterback this weekend.
Last year against the Mountaineers, he completed 78% of his passes, which is absolutely incredible. And on his season last year, starting from the Mountaineers and moving forward, he had a 65.7% completion rate, threw for 1,065 yards, and had 8 touchdowns. Unfortunately, that also came with 4 interceptions. But
got to look at the positive here.
There's room for growth.
We're coming off of a loss. We're looking at the positives.
And he played a really good game against West Virginia. I just remember it because he was new. And he was unknown.
Everyone was like, who's Henry Colombi? And here we are again going, oh my gosh, our star quarterback got hurt again. Here's Henry Colombi. Like,
he's ready to shine. I think we talk about a chip. Talk about someone who has a chip on their shoulder, consistently
years.
not being placed as the starting quarterback, but then having to assume the role within a few games of the season. He has been put at that place of, oh, you're second. You're going to be backup. Right. Oh, wait, crap. We need you.
We need you desperately.
Rise to the plate. And he does. So he really thrives in this light, and he really has opportunity to grow within all of this.
You know, I don't think he's by any means an underdog, but it is cool to watch him always be the number 2 man and kind of starting to fill like that number 1 spot's shoes, just like it's natural and normal for him. I mean, he did this last year. He's going to do it again this year and hopefully be even more successful this year with it.
He had 3 huge passes last week, 2 of them for over 50 yards.
Right.
And those are instrumental plays that against Texas might be kind of brushed off, but against West Virginia could be huge.
And so if you think about it, Henry Colombi came in the second quarter of the game when Tyler Shutt got hurt, and then he was in the game and doing well as the quarterback until about the fourth quarter, and he wasn't necessarily doing bad, but they brought in Donovan Smith. And so this guy really only played, Henry Colombi only really played for the full third quarter and then parts of the second and the fourth. And to have 3 huge plays like that was honestly big to talk about consistency for sure, and not even getting to play, 2 full quarters to say the least. And so I'm excited to see how he's going to do with a full 4-quarter game.
Talking about history repeating itself, the players we had play against West Virginia last year that made those big instrumental game-changing plays are back. Right. Not only is it Henry Colombi, but we have Trey Cleveland at wide receiver, Sirajic Thompson also at running back, and all these guys that led to that win last year are ready to play this year.
Yeah, they're coming off with a chip on their shoulder from this past weekend's loss, and they've already played. They're veterans at this. They know what West Virginia is going to throw at them, and they know what their offense is going to look like. They know what their defense is going to look like. And so it's going to be exciting to see, are they going to use this knowledge to their power and be smarter than them, or are they going to come up to that line of scrimmage and do exactly what happened last week against Texas?
I hope that we have a lot of the veterans leading some of those new guys. Kalen Geiger and Mason Tharp and those new individuals that haven't played West Virginia, that the veterans are saying, hey, we've been here, we've done this before, and we won. Let's repeat. Let's add that little extra bit. Let's watch the film. Let's do whatever we need to do to win this game.
Right. I think it's a really cool thing to think about those comparisons of those guys that are consistent or continuing, like they played West Virginia last year. They'll be here. They're starting again this year for Texas Tech. And it's cool to see because so often in D1 football, you see lots of players transfer and move. We have a lot of guys that have transferred and moved. Henry Colombi came from Utah. It's just interesting to see whenever they have the same matchups for Tech and West Virginia, it's going to be interesting to see when they get down on that line of scrimmage, are they looking across, looking some guy in the eye that they looked at exactly a year ago and being like, all right, I'm ready to face you again. Here we go again, because I've watched your film last year, I've watched it this year, and I know who you are.
And I think this is going to be a big game of grit.
Right.
Because both of these teams are very even. We are actually ranked currently 5th in the Big 12, and they are ranked 6th.
Right, which is kind of interesting because West Virginia actually just came off of a loss against OU, but they gave OU a run for their money. It was 16-13 at the end of the game, and it was a very low offensive game, but they led up until the fourth quarter.
Which is a little scary.
Right.
A little intimidating.
Right.
But I think we can handle it.
Yeah.
It's going to be a defensive matchup, which is scary coming off of Texas, but something we're proud of in our first 3 games. And it's going to be that battle we are all looking for. It's going to be a fight. It's going to be who wants it more.
Yes, a very much so defensive game. And, I think we even said that last week against Texas, it was going to be a defensive game. And it was, but it was just a lack of defense. It was more, there should have been more attention on the defense necessarily. But I'm thinking this week, we're coming off of a loss 70-35. They're coming off of a loss 16-13. What is the score of this game going to be?
Let's flip the coin. Let's get our defense rolling. And let's play a heck of a football game.
Yeah, let's play the heck of a football game. And we need Henry Colombi to throw 3 more really long passes for touchdowns. 21 points would have beat their score last weekend,
Exactly. Speaking of receivers and long passes, we want to highlight someone we're a little bit nervous about, I would say. His name's Winston Wright, and he's a wide receiver for West Virginia. And he's He's showing out.
He's
a little
pretty
bit this season.
good. He's pretty good. He's definitely somebody that, I'm sure the Texas Tech football team is watching film on right now.
Exactly.
They should be.
They're monitoring him closely, and people like Adrian Fry are going to be ready for him. And we're going to have those matchups that we're looking for that hopefully we come on top of.
Right.
I also want to discuss briefly Jarrett Doege. He's the quarterback. He completed 20 for 29 passes last week for 160 yards.
Right.
And Letty Brown, who's the running back for West Virginia, and he had 15 carries last game.
Yeah.
We don't have...
So, the score from last weekend, 16-13 from between OU and West Virginia, just goes to show that their defense showed out, and their defense is, it seems like they might be a little bit ahead of us, but I'm hoping that some of those guys that have already played West Virginia before will notice that, recognize that, see their offense and defense, and be prepared going forward into this game. Last week...
So we mentioned some big players to remember. We have Winston Wright, we have Jarrett Doege, we have Letty Brown for West Virginia. Let's jump into those pigskin players and know the players we should talk about for Tech that we need to keep an eye out, that we have been watching, that we're excited to continue watching, that we hope make this game a win.
Right. So one of those players that we really, really gave a lot of praise to, and for good reason, early on in the season when it's Eric Azukama. You've heard us say it a million times. You're going to keep hearing us say it. But we haven't even talked about him this podcast quite yet because he really didn't, his stats did not go to show from last weekend's game that he had such a show out game. And so I'm kind of waiting for him to have another big game, honestly. And I'm excited to see how he will handle, I'm excited to see how he will handle West Virginia's defense this upcoming game. And, will he find those gaps? Will he find those holes? Will Henry Colombi find Eric Azukama?
And I think that's one thing that we can really attribute to Texas once again is we know they watch their film.
Right.
They saw Eric Azukama. They said, oh,
we're going to cover him.
This guy's
pretty good.
We should probably hop on that. And they did, and they covered him well. But that did allow for us to have some big passes for people like Kalen Geiger. We're excited to see him this week, both last week and against FIU. Against FIU, he had 6 receptions, 121 yards. And against Texas, he had 5 receptions, 100 yards, and a touchdown. So if he's consistently growing and consistently making those game-changing plays, he's going to be someone you need to watch out for.
Yeah, and I think that, going forward, now that he has a little bit of a chip on his shoulder and he's gotten some more playing time and gotten some bigger plays within that game, even though it wasn't overall a great game, he had some great plays. He's going to come out with a lot of confidence in that. He's going to come out with confidence, and I think we're going to see the same pattern happen there with Henry Colombi. He has that composure about him. He's ready to go into this game. He knows what this is like. He did this exactly last year at this exact time with West Virginia, and so it's going to be interesting to see how they come out this game prepared. It's almost kind of like some fresh legs, and quite literally with Henry Colombi. Exactly.
They are fresh legs.
Literally.
And we highlighted that our defense needs to be full of grit. I think a couple of our players that are really full of that tenacity, they need to win. Eric Monroe has been getting gradually better each game. Right.
And he's somebody that, I feel like we may have seen coming, but maybe we didn't. He transferred here from LSU, and I'm excited to see how well he's just going to keep getting. I could definitely see him peaking at the right time at the end of the season and being prepared to go to the NFL, potentially.
And he's definitely one of those guys that, like Tyree Wilson, is very understated because he is sometimes in the shadow of people like Rico Jeffers and Colin Schooler, but he has the same amount of impact, and he carries the defense in the same way. So I'm excited to watch him play against West Virginia to carry that mentality, to carry that silent leadership. There's vocal leaders, and there's leaders based on action. And Eric Monroe is very much a leader based on action.
Eric Monroe is one of those guys that, we said he transferred from LSU, and he's also been hurt. He's been through COVID. He is a senior. He is, he has been through it all in college football, pretty much. It sounds like he was there when LSU won the national championship.
He's seen the highest of heights.
He really has. And now he's seen us also been there whenever we lost against Texas. And so it's kind of interesting to see how he consistently shows out and does well, not based on the end score or not based on what coaching staff he has, not based on the rest of his defense that he has. It's kind of like Eric Monroe is kind of untouchable when it comes to his consistency, honestly, and that's something that I love to see within Tech's defense, especially because we continue to have guys that will come in here, have a couple of good games, and then disappear. And so it's cool to see that Eric Monroe, regardless of his circumstances, has continued to do well.
He really brings that maturity to the defense that couples strongly with the immaturity of our offense.
Right.
We have some young guys. We have some lack of experience. But it's really complemented by the veterans on our defense. And the combination of both of those, and hopefully the improvement on special teams, are going to be really big this week.
They are.
And hopefully push us to a win.
Right. And, another thing that I am just sitting here thinking about, processing last week's game, trying to get it out of my mind, honestly, and just move forward with the rest of the season. That was only our 4th game. It was only our 4th game. We have a lot of football left to play. It's still hot outside. We haven't even gotten to the fall football where it's chilly and cold, especially here in Lubbock, Texas.
It might be in Morgantown.
Right.
It might be cold in Morgantown.
It might be a little bit chilly in Morgantown.
So we've mentioned the highs and lows of last week. We mentioned the highs going into this week. We mentioned the personality. We mentioned the chip on the shoulder. But I would love to hear from some of y'all. I know a lot of y'all are hardcore committed Tech fans.
Right. That's the reason you're listening to this podcast, right?
So where are y'all going to be watching the game from?
Right.
We would love to know.
Yes.
Let us know. Comment on Instagram. Comment on YouTube. Let's get some interaction going.
Yes.
For reference, the game is in West Virginia at 2:30 p.m.
Right.
on Saturday.
Yes.
A good time. It's hopefully going to be nice there. Our boys are going to be ready to play. Let's hear from y'all. We would love to hear it.
Yes, we would love to hear it. I mean, I'm going to be watching the game Saturday here in Lubbock, Texas. I wish I could go to Morgantown, but until someone buys my flight tickets, I guess I'll just be watching the game here. I'll be watching the game with my dad and my mom. And
who might be some of the most hardcore Tech fans
I've
literally ever met.
Yes, and so I feel like, I don't know, I'm excited to hear where everyone's going to be watching the game from. Do we have some hardcore committed fans that are going to be going all the way to Morgantown, West Virginia? Like,
exactly.
Who knows?
It's the 5th game of the season.
Right.
Let's keep climbing. Let's not give up hope.
Yes.
Let's see where it's going.
Yes.
And let's get it next week. Thanks for listening to 4th and 1 with Faith and Kayla.